and we are going to get started. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Janine. I'm the events lead at Meetup, and welcome to today's event, The Secrets of Networking Part 2, Connecting When You Can't Be in the Room with Michael Roderick. Some of you might remember Michael from his previous event back in October, The Secrets of Networking Part 1. In today's event, Michael's going to revisit some of his timeless relationship building principles, which he already discussed some. Some of them before in his previous event, and he'll address the psychological barriers we build around networking. You'll learn how to reach out without hesitation, host events that get people talking about you, and discover how to get more professional referrals. I'm definitely taking notes on all of the above. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to go over some guidelines quickly before we hand it over to Michael. So this event is recorded, but do not worry, you will not appear on video. You will only see myself and Michael, and in a little bit, you will not be seeing me either. But you can watch a recording of this event on our blog, meetup.com/blog. And just forewarning, it will not be available until Friday. Everyone is muted, so if you're trying to speak and you can't, the mute button isn't broken, it's just everyone's muted except for Michael and I. And if you have questions, yes, please ask your questions. We love your questions. We encourage you to ask questions. All we ask is that you submit your questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. And some of you may have noticed we have closed captioning. You can turn it on. There's a button on the bottom of your screen where it says live transcription. Live transcript. Gosh, I cannot talk now. I'm still thinking about Kansas. Live transcript, just if you hover over it and you can click on turning on the transcription. And also, if you don't want the transcription, you can also change it on there and turn it off. Next slide. So this was the introduction for the event. Michael is going to introduce himself, and then he's going to take over. After Michael is done sharing all of his frameworks, I am going to ask Michael the questions that you all submit in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. So without further ado, I'm going to let Michael take it away.
Awesome. All right. So I'm just going to pull up. I'm going to do the whole screen share thing. Make sure that that's working. Okay. Are people seeing? You're seeing. You're not seeing. There we go. Can everybody see the connecting when you can't be in the room slide right now?
I can see it.
Okay. Great. Just wanted to make sure before I got started, and then you're switching it to things and people are like, I can't see, this thing's happening, that thing's happening kind of scenario. So I'll give you guys just a little bit of background on me. My name is Michael Roderick, and my background is I started out as a high school English teacher, and I went from being a high school English teacher to becoming a Broadway producer in under 2 years. So a lot of people started asking me about how I was getting into all of the rooms that I was getting into and sort of what I was doing on the relationship building side. So I started to develop a bunch of frameworks around this, and I started to teach those frameworks, develop those frameworks. These days, a lot of my work is specifically in the world of thought leadership and helping people think about how they're sharing their ideas and getting their ideas out into the world. And I spend a lot of time also just always thinking about sort of how do we become more effective in our connecting process, in our developing of relationships, et cetera. So what we're going to focus on with this particular presentation is this idea of connecting when you can't be in the room, because we are all, for the most part, depending on where you're dialing in from, we're in a situation where we can't be in rooms with each other in the way that we used to be able to, right? So from a networking standpoint, we're not getting these opportunities to be at the large conferences, at the big events, at all of those different types of things, and everything now is virtual that you're dealing with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a number of frameworks networks today that focus around this idea of how you can connect when you can't be in the room. We're going to dig really deep into things that you can do, active things that you can do, as well as just what's actually going on psychologically in this whole particular process. So I'm going to just start right off the bat with the fact that everybody right now is in a state of managing online overwhelm. You are probably on lots of different video calls. You're probably dealing with a lot more of the social media side of things than you had originally anticipated. And for many people, they are on, if you're doing any kind of networking, you're probably on multiple platforms as well. So it's not just that you're on the Book of Faces, you're also, on LinkedIn, you're also on Twitter. You may be, for some of you, you may be on Clubhouse right now. You're doing Zoom calls and all these different types of things. And as a result, this can really just make it so that you cannot keep track of anything. And the danger of being on all of these different platforms is that any one of these platforms, a message could slip through the cracks. So somebody could be reaching out to you right now on one of these channels, and you may be missing it because of that sense of overwhelm. So what I recommend for this, and what I think is probably one of the most important things that you can do, is create what I like to refer to as a one-channel method. And what the one channel method means is you decide where you would like all of your correspondence to go. And it sounds so obvious, right? It sounds like, well, of course, I'm going to just decide like where I want my correspondence to go. But the number of people who actually do and say, okay, I'm going to focus on this channel as my main place where I'm talking to people, it's actually very, very small. So personally, my one channel is email. So I am always focused on responding to email, staying in touch, keeping on top of that. So my one channel, because it's email, if I get a message on LinkedIn, or if I get a message on the Book of Faces, or I get a message on any social media platform, I will not continue the conversation for very long on that particular platform. So if somebody reaches out to me via LinkedIn, I will say, fantastic, I would love to chat more. If that's what they're asking, if they're asking to talk to me, I will say that's great. Feel free to send me an email at this address, and I'll give them an email to send to. And then I always know where it is. I always know where the conversation is. So I think if you haven't thought about this yet, this is one of the best ways to manage all of this online overwhelm that you're starting to deal with. But the other piece of this that I think is really, really important, and again, is something that most of us don't necessarily think about, is the idea of curating your existing network. And it's absolutely fascinating how very, very often we will think about the food that we put into our bodies. We will think about curating so many different aspects of our lives, but we very, very rarely ever think about, who am I actually bringing into my life? Right? Who are the people that I am spending time with, that I am getting to know, and what are those dynamics of those people? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about some tools that you can use from the curating standpoint. But the other point that I want to make that's really important is to create a command center for yourself. So if you have a lot of relationships, you want to ask yourself, where am I holding all of these relationships? So personally, I use a spreadsheet. For the people that I'm connecting with, that I'm getting to know, I have a spreadsheet of all of those names, and I've got little columns for things like where they live, what kinds of things they're looking for help with, what kind of business they have, all of those different types of elements, and it becomes a command center for me. So if somebody says, I'm in LA and I'm trying to find a really great entertainment attorney, I can just go to that spreadsheet and I can search for entertainment attorney, and I can see right away who everybody is within my network who is an entertainment attorney in LA. So I use a spreadsheet. I find it very, very useful. Some of you may decide to use a number of the different CRMs that are out there, but the most important aspect is make sure that you do have a command center. Make sure that you do have somewhere that you're going to look up who is in your network, what they're actually doing, what's going on with them. That is not just your email or social media channel, because there's so many other distractions on that. You want to be able to look right away and say, like, okay, these are the people I know, this is what's going on. So that being said, I'm going to talk to you about how you curate and the different types of people that you're going to encounter. And what I want to stress here is that this is not a blanket type of thing where, you are literally just this type and that's all you are. You could show up as different types in different meetings. So as I go through each of these, I'm going to suggest that you not look at it from the angle of, oh, well, this is good and this is bad, but rather think about it as, this is how I would approach this person, or this is how I would manage my network based on this type of individual. So the first type of individual that I like to talk about is the advocate. And the advocate is the person in your network who loves to help you. This is the person who, when you meet them, they're always asking about you. They want to help you. They want to support you. They want to do more for you, all of these different types of things. Now, what's really, really interesting about these types of people in your network, and if you are yourself an advocate, you're going to notice this about yourself, is that advocates are awful at advocating for themselves. So the people who are in your network who love to help, who love to support you, who love to do things for you, many of these people are not going to tell you what they need, are not going to let you know what types of things their challenges are, what they're struggling with, or any of those types of things, because they really enjoy this aspect of just being helpful, of just supporting. And the reason behind that psychologically is that when we help others, there is a chemical reaction that happens in the body. Now, some say it's oxytocin, some say it's dopamine. Regardless of whatever chemical you want to say it is, you get a rush when you do things for others. There is actually no rush associated with asking or letting people know what it is that you actually need. So a lot of people who fall into the advocate category suffer from what I like to refer to as the giver's fix. They get hooked on giving. They're pumping themselves full of that good feeling of helping others and supporting others. So they're not very good at letting you know what it is that they need. They're not very good at ever asking. So for the people that fall into the advocate category in your network, you want to spend more time reaching out to them and finding out how they're doing and what's going on, because they're the easiest people to lose in your network. They probably won't follow up with you multiple times. They're going to do something for you and in many cases just kind of disappear. The second group really is where most of networking kind of falls into when it's being done in a very transactional way. And these are the boomerangs. These are the people that if they do something for you, they're going to expect you to do something for them. It is always a transactional relationship. So the important thing to understand about when you're meeting with somebody who falls into that boomerang category is that these individuals are going to add to the amount of time that you have to spend. So if you're meeting with a boomerang, not only are you going to be talking to them about what it is that they need and come away with notes about all the things that you're going to do for them, but you're going to talk to them about what they can do for you. And it's going to be a very transactional sort of back and forth type of conversation. And if you end up in that type of situation, there's a lot of follow-up on your end and on their end. So you actually have to spend a lot more time when you're dealing with people who fall into that boomerang category, when it is very, very transactional. The next category that you're going to run into are what I like to refer to as celebrities. And what's really, really interesting about the idea of celebrity is that everybody is a celebrity to someone, but celebrity is relative to everyone. So there are circles within your network, there are people that you know who in your world, they're not a celebrity. They're just a friend, a buddy from work, or whatever the scenario it is. But there are other people within your network who see that person as a celebrity, who see that person as famous, who see that person as being very influential or very helpful or any of those types of things. So it's really important to take the time to figure out, well, who are those celebrities in my network? Who are the people that everybody wants to know that I already know? Who am I always getting asked for an introduction to? And the most important aspect of that in terms of managing your own network and really curating is knowing that when you encounter a celebrity, they're probably going to be way more guarded with their time. So they are probably not the people to just give like hundreds of introductions to, because they're really only going to want like a handful of introductions, right? Because everybody's coming to them and sort of searching for them. So it's really important to understand who are the celebrities within your network, and make sure that you're setting boundaries when you're having conversations with people about making introductions or making connections. And the last category are the drains. And basically the idea behind a drain is the fact that this is an individual who is at a point where they are in such a high state of need that they can't possibly give right now. And I always love to take a moment to pause around this, because I think that a lot of the time we look at this idea of the drains and we'll think, well, these are the people that we want to avoid. These are the energy vampires. These are the people who are going to cause all the problems, and all these different types of things. And what's really, really important to understand about this is that everybody at some point in their life has had to be a drain. We all have had moments where we really just needed to receive rather than give. So it's very, very important to understand that you may encounter people who are at a point where they're not really in a place to give or support. But here's what's really important about that I think a lot of people forget about, is that there's a very fine line between helping and enabling. So if you're helping somebody, you're giving them the tools to be able to do something for themselves, to be able to help themselves, to be able to support themselves. If you're enabling them, you're doing everything for them. And you're making them believe that you are their savior, that you are going to fix everything, that you are going to fix all the problems. So with drains, it's very easy for you to end up in a situation where you end up spending way more time with these people, and in many cases ignoring your advocates, because of this sense of like, I want to make sure that I'm able to help. So it's really important, as you're noticing drains in your network, or you're noticing that somebody is in that sort of drain state, to guard your time and to make sure that you are not just giving up all of your time, energy, and attention to the drains within your network. So it's really important, as you're kind of going through this, to start to think about, once I've had a meeting with somebody, which category would I put them in? And then if you have a spreadsheet, or if you have a place where you're tagging this, document it for yourself. So okay, I'm meeting with somebody who is more of an advocate. I need to be more proactive about finding out what's going on. Or I'm meeting with somebody who has been more of a drain. I need to be protective of my time. Or I'm meeting with boomerangs. It's very transactional. So how do I make sure that I have the time to meet with this person, that I have the time to do the follow-ups that I actually need to do, and, sort of go through that whole particular process. So when you do this, when you curate your existing network and you have a command center for it, it really helps you, especially now with everything that's coming in, to manage all of that overwhelm. Because the more curated it is, okay, I know how much time I'm going to need to spend here with this person. I know how I'm going to stay in touch with my network or not stay in touch with my network, and all of those different types of things. So that's a breakdown of how you're going to manage your online overwhelm, as well as a way to think about this idea of how you might curate. And again, take the time to ask yourself which category you fall into, and how is your network reacting to you in regards to that category. If you do agree that you fall into that advocate category, are you making sure that people know what it is that you need? Because very, very often when we give and support and help everybody else, we educate them to believe that we have no needs. So it's really important to break that down and sort of make that happen. So now, in the last presentation, I had talked about the aspect of the ocean of events, and there are a bunch of different archetypes within this ocean of events. But now we're doing the online events. And there's a whole different ocean. So there's different archetypes that you deal with. So when you're dealing with online events, one of the first archetypes that you're going to encounter are what I like to refer to as the sharks. And these are the people who are pretty much always um, asking for things, promoting themselves, putting their stuff out there. So these are the people who, like, in the chat are spamming you with their like LinkedIn profiles and basically saying like, hey, pay attention to me, or hey, let's connect while somebody's doing a presentation or something, something along those lines, right? These are the people who, if you do go into breakout rooms, they're trying to dominate all of the conversations. They're taking other people's time. They're doing all these things that basically just kind of suck up all of the energy within the room. But then you also have the group that I like to refer to as the dolphins. And these are the people who, they're not really interested in connecting. They're really only interested in connecting with each other. And in the online world, you're going to see this where people are just like private messaging each other, or sort of like developing these groups and sort of keeping people out of their circles, keeping people out of the loop of what it is that they're doing, and the work, and the work that they're a part of. And that leads to what I like to refer to as those who are drowning. And these are the people who, in the online world, they are maybe having trouble with the technology. They are maybe feeling awkward, or they're just being dominated when they go into one of these breakout rooms and they never get a chance to speak. They feel very, very awkward. They feel like they don't belong. They have a lot of those particular types of challenges. And the last category, which is a really important category, and if you yourself ever feel like you're drowning, if you ever feel in any of these situations like you are just feeling awkward, feeling like you're not really a part of the conversation, feeling like you're not in the, in things, one of the best things that you can do is be this last category, which is a lifeguard. Because what a lifeguard does is a lifeguard looks around for who is uncomfortable and then reaches out to that person. So if you're a lifeguard in a Zoom room, when there's a breakout, you might stop the shark and ask the person who's not talking at all, what do they think? If you're the host of an event, you can be the lifeguard by stopping something that's happening. Maybe like the chat is just like going kind of crazy, and you address what's going on in the chat, right? And you stop whatever's happening. Or if you can see that there are side conversations, you take the time to address those things, especially if you're the one running or sort of managing the group, or dealing with the group. And the thing is, you can do this not only in just online events, but you can do this in social media as well. So most of the time when people are thinking about social media, they're thinking about it in the context of like, how do I promote myself, right? So there's like, what posts can I put out? What content can I create? What things can I do? But you can also be a lifeguard on social and just look for, what are people asking for or posting about? And then you can jump into those chats, into those conversations. You can private message the person who's just, said that they have a need that they're looking for, or you can comment on their post and say like, hey, I know somebody who could help with this or who could do that. And I'm telling you that one of the best ways to build your network is to be a lifeguard, is to constantly look around you, because in every situation, in every scenario, there is somebody who's drowning. So the more that you think about that, and the more that you put yourself into that lifeguard mentality, what's fascinating is if you have any kind of anxiety about reaching out to people, connecting with people, or any of those different types of things, when you put yourself in that role of the lifeguard, you shift the way that you're thinking, because you're not thinking, oh man, how do I prove myself to this group? Or how do I prove myself socially? You're thinking, who can I help? And what can I do to help them? So as you start to navigate more of this ocean of online events, start to ask yourself, what kinds of events are you dealing with? And are those events filled with sharks? If they are, maybe you don't want to be at those events anymore. If you are noticing that there are a lot of lifeguards, or that lifeguards who are basically putting events together, maybe you want to spend more time at those events and do more things with those particular events. So that's just a way to start to think about this online event space, specifically in regards to these different archetypes. Okay. So everybody at this point, for the most part, is in a position where you do have to reach out to people. It's not like you can just go out anymore and just sort of randomly meet. Like, you really do have to start doing the outreach. So I want to talk to you all about what I like to refer to as the Breaking Bad cold outreach technique. So you're probably going to have to reach out to people cold. Like, a lot of the time you'll be able to get an introduction, and sometimes there will be ways to sort of smooth it over. But, the fact of the matter is, you're going to want to do some kind of outreach to somebody and you're not going to have a very, very strong connection to them. So in order to figure out the best way to get response from them, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how Breaking Bad was written. So basically, one of the things that you learn about television advertising is that if somebody changes the channel very, very early on, then the ratings do not count. So if I'm watching a show and I turn it off within the first 5 minutes, or I switch to another channel, I'm not counted as part of those ratings. But if I watch a show all the way to the middle, or I watch a show to the end, I'm counted as one of the viewers who watched the whole thing. So that's how the shows get their ratings. So what the folks at Breaking Bad did was absolute genius, because what they would do is they would open the show with a scene that you could not explain. You just had no idea. You were trying to figure out, like, well, why is this, this thing happening with these characters? And they wouldn't pay off that scene until sometimes the middle of the show, or sometimes the end of the show, or sometimes they'd even make you wait 2 episodes before you found out why that opening scene was what it was. And when you are reaching out to people cold, the number one mistake I see people make when it comes to the outreach is that they don't do that. They tell people everything. They give them everything. And what you want to do when you're reaching out to people is you want to create that Breaking Bad kind of effect. You want to say something that makes them so curious about you that they want to respond, that they want to find out the answer, that they want to know more about you. And that's the thing. Most of the time we just take too much and we say, like, here is everything about me. Here's everything that you need to know. Here's this massive paragraph about why you should talk to me, or why I'm a good fit for your podcast, or any number of those different types of things. And the fact of the matter is, if there's no curiosity, it's very easy for somebody to just say yes or no to something. It's so easy, if I already know all the answers, to be like, yep, that sounds fine, or nope, that's not for me. But if I don't know the answer, I'm going to be far more interested in reaching out to find out the answer. I'm going to be very, very curious about the answer. So the more that you can write subject lines when you're let's say you're doing an email to somebody on LinkedIn. If your subject line just creates all of this curiosity, then people will open it up and actually read it. But if your subject line is something like, want to meet, or want to grab coffee, or any number of these generic subject lines, you've already given them all they need to basically have no reason to open that email, to open that message. So you want to create that curiosity. You want to really focus on that Breaking Bad cold outreach technique if you want people to start getting in touch with you and you want them to start reaching out to you. Another thing, though, that is very, very underused is what I like to refer to as the power of hosting. So hosting something is not always easy, right? Putting something together and saying, like, here's the date, this is when it's going to happen, here are the people, inviting people, managing all of the logistics of it. It's not something everybody signs up to do. It's not something everybody enjoys doing necessarily. So as a result, there are only a handful of people who ever are willing to take the effort to host something. So if you are in the early stages of building your network, or you're trying to reconnect with your network, maybe you had a massive issue during COVID, right? And when, like, things really sort of just like fell apart, you just like were off the grid. And now all of a sudden you've got to come back and get your network to know you again, get them to understand you again, all that kind of stuff. You could certainly try to reach out individually to every single person that you would like to reconnect with. Or you could reach out to all of them at once and say, hey, I'm hosting a get together. Now, here's the value of hosting your own thing. A, you can curate it, right? Just like I had talked about curating before, like you can decide who shows up. And we're going to talk more about hosting your own event in much more detail sort of as we get towards the end of this, right? But B, you can introduce the people within your network to each other. And this is more powerful than anything else. I have made more opportunities happen as a result of hosting something where people got together and got a job or had an opportunity to start a business together or any number of those things. And then they reached out to me and said, hey, here's something that I think would be interesting for you, or here's people who should go to your events, right? The other side of this is the aspect of if you're reaching out to influential people, let's say you really want to talk to CEOs, or let's say you really want to talk to, if you're an actor and you really want to talk to more casting agents and like decision maker types, those people are far, far more likely to show up to an event than they are to take a one-on-one meeting. Because a one-on-one meeting is a serious commitment of their time, and they don't know what they could potentially get out of it. But if you say that you're hosting an event, then they could be meeting lots of different people who could potentially help them, who could potentially support them, who could help them move their business forward and their opportunities forward. And all you're doing is creating the platform for those people to do it. Now, the last point I'm going to make about reaching out to people is what I call associative leverage. And this applies to hosting and this applies to your outreach as well. Very simply put, if I happen to see you with somebody who is influential, I instantly assume that that's the type of person you hang out with. And this is why you see tons and tons of pictures of people with celebrities taking selfies, doing all the, thumbs up and all of those types of things, because people see it and they think, oh, that's somebody who knows celebrities. That's somebody who knows famous people, right? So even though you basically ran up to Elon Musk at the dry cleaners and snapped one photo, with him, that one photo causes people to believe that you hang out with Elon. And associative leverage works across all sorts of different mediums. So if you reach out to somebody and you reference something that they already recognize or that they already know, they're actually way more likely to answer the email. So for example, if anybody reaches out to me and says that they're from Rhode Island, I am 10 times more likely to respond to them. Why? Because that's where I grew up, right? That's where I grew up before I moved to New York City. So I have a soft spot for anybody who is from Rhode Island because Rhode Island's tiny and everybody knows everybody. And, going to a big city or going to like a bigger thing was a challenge in the early stages of my own career of sort of getting out there. So I am going to naturally respond to that, right? But there are other people who maybe Harvard was a really big part of their business and a part of their life. So if you knew someone and you had also gone to Harvard, mentioning that, right? Or maybe you read in an article that they are a huge fan of a particular TV show and you are also a fan of that show. You send an email with the subject line about that show. Now, here's what's really, really important about associative leverage. You can't fake it. Okay? So you can't say that you love Breaking Bad to try and get somebody to answer your email and have not watched it and not understand it, because they will call you on it. Okay? So you have to make sure with the associative leverage that you do have some kind of connection. But let's say you're hosting something. If you have somebody else who's attending and they tell you, yeah, perfectly fine to let other folks know that I'm attending, you can reach out to people and say, so-and-so is coming. And if they already have a brand that they're associated with, there will be a bunch of people who come because of your association with that brand. So you can use this idea of associative leverage to actually bring more people to the table. when I first moved to the city and I was starting to get into more of the thought leadership side of things, I would co-host dinners with New York Times bestselling authors. Because if I said, hey, I'm hosting this dinner with a New York Times bestselling author, and I reached out to another New York Times bestselling author, they were way more likely to come to the dinner than if I said, hey, I'm hosting a dinner, you're a New York Times bestselling author, do you want to hang out with me? Right? So it's all about this aspect of creating associative leverage, using associative leverage when you're doing that outreach, when you're reaching out to people. All right. So let's say you do get a meeting. Most of the time, the challenge that people have with meetings is, how do I add value within the meeting? How do I make sure that, people feel like this meeting was really worth it? And 9 times out of 10, we're always worried about what kind of value we can add. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through what I call the rise up method. And these are all the different ways that you, no matter what level you're at, could add value to a meeting, no matter what level the other person is at. So you could meet with someone who is your senior. You could meet with someone who is, way ahead of you in business, and you could still add value to their life if you follow this process, the rise up method. So the first one, it's a pretty easy one, is referrals. If you take the time to understand what it is that they do, how much they charge for it, and you send them somebody else who's willing to spend money on them, that is an instant value add. Now, not everybody does good referrals. Actually, most people do not do good referrals. Most people basically refer to just introducing you to somebody as a referral. That's not a referral, it's an introduction. You only have a referral if you have talked to somebody ahead of time about the service and the other person has said, yes, I want to meet that person, and yes, I'm in the market to buy. That's a referral. So if you do that, you can completely change the way that you're perceived. And if you are really taking the time to understand somebody and give them a good referral, chances are they're also going to take the time to understand you and give you a good referral, which is a very, very powerful thing. Introductions. Another very, very easy thing. You may think, wow, here's somebody else who I think this person should know. And you introduce those two people. It is adding value to their network. It's adding value to their experience. One caveat is you want to follow what I like to refer to and what's often been mentioned as the double opt-in. So you want to say to the person, listen, I'll only make the intro if the other person tells me they're open to it. So tell me a little bit about what you want to talk to them about, and I'll talk to them. And that's what you do. You find out, about the other person. You say, okay, I think this person could be a good intro. Then you go to the person you want to introduce them to and you ask them, you say, is this okay? And if they say yes, you make the intro. The next category is strategy. And the thing that's really interesting about the idea of strategy is that we have all of these things that have worked for us in our lives that have been very, very helpful, but we kind of forget that they worked or we forget about them. So if the person you're talking to talks about an issue or a challenge that they have, you can always say, listen, this is something that has worked for me, right? I found this effective, or I found this useful. And again, it's another way of adding value. And if you're a consultant or a coach, or you fall into one of those types of categories, providing just simple strategy and some ideas as to like new ways to look at things is one of the best ways to show people your value, as opposed to telling them your value. As opposed to saying like, hey, this is what I do, or this is why you should hire me. You just show them that you understand the strategy and show them like, I can break this down for you. I can help you understand these concepts. The next is events. So you're going to get invited to lots and lots of things, and there's going to be a lot of things that you just can't attend because life is busy, things come up, etc. So what you can do is you can take those events and you can share them with your network. You can let other people know about those events. You can ask if somebody else can go in your place and then share that ticket, share that thing with them. So if you're talking to somebody and you get invited to a gathering and you can't make it because you're going to be at another gathering, ask them, would it be okay to invite somebody else and then send somebody else their way? Great way to stay in touch with your network. Unknowns. So there's stuff that you've read, there's tools that you've used technology wise, there's books that you love, and you may think that everybody knows about those books, but most of the time they do not. So if you're the person to introduce somebody to a new technology, right, that basically kind of changes the game, right? So like if I said, if you're having trouble with background noise in Zoom and you check out Crisp AI, KRISP.ai, it basically will make it so that you can't hear the background noise, but you can still hear you. There are a bunch of people on the technology side who know that, but then there are a bunch of people who are like, wow, that's a new tool. I want to learn about it. I want to know more about it. Or if I said to you, if you want to make sure that your inbox goes to zero much, much faster, to use Superhuman or something, right? Like a bunch of people would be like, oh, I've heard of that. And a bunch of people would not. So the more that you sort of introduce people to unknowns, the easier it is to show that value. And then the last category is press. And a number of years back, we were in this place where basically, there were only certain decision makers, but now everybody is a contributor to a platform. Everybody has something to say on a particular platform. So you could literally go to your LinkedIn right now, type in whatever publication you're interested in and the word contributor, and you may already be connected to or have a second tier connection with somebody who writes about whatever that topic is, who could write about you or have you on their podcast or any number of those things. And the other thing that's really important about press is you want to be the source instead of the subject. So if you just try to pitch yourself, then you can really only get one interview or one presentation. But if you basically ask people, what do you like to write about, or what types of people do you like to interview? And then you constantly think of who else can you connect in your network to those people, then you are the darling of that person because you're constantly sending them new content, new people from a press standpoint. And I know time's getting tight, so I'm going to keep rolling. So if you want to keep a flow in the network, what I like to refer to is, I call this the gate strategy. So every day you want to give without expectation of return. You want to take the time to ask for something that you truly need. You want to take the time to say thank you every single day, because most of us never say thank you or don't say thank you in a meaningful way. And you want to take the time to experiment. So take the time to basically learn as much as you can about what your processes are. And then every day just test something new. Say, okay, well, normally I host this kind of gathering. I'm going to host this kind of gathering today. I'm going to try this thing. I'm going to make something a little different. The last piece about keeping flow in your network is the idea of leveraging your time versus trading it. So if you leverage your time, you're always thinking about, okay, can I host something and get everybody together and then follow up and do the one-on-one meetings, as opposed to always going to people one-on-one and having those conversations. So if you want to host your own connection-focused event, here is probably the most important batch of things that you need to know about this. Number one, find a co-host. Find somebody who wants to do the things that you don't want to do. So if the technology part is freaking you out, find somebody who loves technology. If the hosting part is freaking you out, find someone who would love to host and do the technology. Even if you got to learn it, it's not that complicated. Second, curate the group. Take the time to figure out who should be there. Really identify like which people should be in the room. Next, find a theme that focuses on collaboration. So in the past, I've done things where it's like, here's a bunch of podcast hosts, here's a bunch of podcast guests, and I've looped those people together. Speakers with meeting planners, etc. Use an intake form. Take the time to find out as much as you can about people before they get in the room, because then you can make a lot of intros and make a lot of connections and make a lot of things happen. Icebreakers as well as ice makers. Ask them those opening questions of like, what's your favorite food and all those different types of things. But if you want your event to go even deeper, you want to use what I like to refer to as an ice melter, where what you do is you can ask a deeper question. So you can put them into groups and say, in a group, talk about what is your biggest fear, or what is your biggest challenge, or what's your most happy memory, or any of those types of things that really get them to sort of talk to each other on a more sort of, personal level. And then the last one is give them a way to connect with one another afterwards that's permission based. So a lot of the time what I'll do is I'll send people a Google form and I'll say, you all wanted to connect with each other, fill in this form with whichever contact info you prefer, because a lot of times people sign up with an email that they don't want shared. And then I'll put all of that into a spreadsheet that I share with everybody else as I help them with that. And I'm telling you, hosting your own connection focused event can be a super, super powerful tool. It can really change things. So that is, I used to teach high school, so that is a lot of information in a very, very short period of time, but excited to get a chance to dig in on the question side of things and chat more.
Thanks, Michael. You can stop sharing your screen now.
All righty. Let me see if I can do that. Stop share. Perfect.
And we have a ton of questions for you.
Awesome.
So I think before I even look at the questions, I saw a lot of questions on the Breaking Bad technique. People want examples of how, what's the subject line, what would be, what would the body of the email say?
Sure. So often the best way to create the example is to think about whatever it is that you want to talk about, and then think about what can you leave out, right? So a lot of the time, I might write something that references something that they've written before or that they've created before, and then that gets them to open the email. So let's just say, for example, somebody's they just wrote an email and they reference Transformers. So I might say, curious Transformers and networking ? And all of a sudden they're like, what's going on? They want to know sort of what that particular scenario is, right? And it's you're always trying to create this dynamic where people are I'm curious as to find out sort of more about it. So if I said excited to teach you about an industry, the only industry that studies itself. Instantly you're well, what is the only industry that studies itself, right? You're curious about what is that industry, sort of how does that work? So you're always thinking, how do I A, reference something that they're going to recognize, and B, how do I make them so curious that they need to read the message, right? So let's say I was selling a podcast software, right? And let's say the software was a noise canceling software, right? I might write something along the lines of, what if you could have somebody screaming next to you in the middle of your podcast and not have to worry about it? And then people are well, what does that, what does that mean, et cetera? Or, podcasting tool while screaming. It could be something really, really simple. Sometimes it's literally one word that you can get somebody to be really, really curious about something. So I could have an email subject line that's just Yoda. And instantly,
I love Yoda.
Right? That's the thing. You would open it, right? You would open it. And that's the thing, right? So it's that type of scenario. And when you create that scenario of people being curious enough to open, they'll read whatever you have to say. And then if in the message, you don't give them everything, and you say, I'd love to talk to you more about this thing I discovered or this thing that I've noticed, et cetera. They're well, what is that thing you discovered? What is that thing that you notice, right? Somebody just put in the chat, Grogu, and that's the thing. It's that Baby Yoda, scenario, right? Everybody was so curious about it. That's why all the memes happened and everything else, because of the curiosity that developed from it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Oh, no worries.
There's Otis.
Hi, Otis.
Oh boy, they're doing construction in the apartment next door. Thank you for sharing that. When you and I spoke and you shared that technique, I told you it was a great one. I've never heard of it, and it was just so smart, right? A really great hook. Okay, so next question. Anonymous asked, can you give some examples of boundaries that you're talking about with advocates, boomerangs, celebrities, and drains?
Sure. So this goes across the board, whichever category you're working with. When we're talking about boundaries, we're talking about you making a decision about the boundaries around your time. So most people suffer from what I like to refer to as the tyranny of default time. And the tyranny of default time is often that the way that we've been educated is to think that every meeting, every conversation should be an hour. And most things are actually like literally put on calendars as an hour long, for the most part. For some people, 30 minutes, right? But there are plenty of instances where you can, do a 15-minute call, and that is okay. If you want to go further with somebody, you can always go further with them, especially if it's the first time that you're sort of connecting with them and getting to know them. And then if it's the type of thing where you're looking at the meeting, right? The more boundaries that you put around the meeting, the less likely you're going to have issues. Like, so a drain isn't going to be able to spend the whole time trying to drain, for 15 minutes, right? You'll be able to give them some like quick advice in a 15-minute sort of conversation. If it's an advocate that, you want to spend more time with, you can say that you have a 15-minute meeting, but actually block out 30 minutes or 45 minutes on your calendar. It's up to you how you present yourself to the people who are meeting with you. They don't have to know what your calendar actually looks like. And you can decide, like, you could say like, okay, I'm going to have 30 minutes in between my meetings, and that's my follow-up time. That's my time to do additional things. You are in charge of the boundaries that you set when it comes to your time and when it comes to these individuals. And so, for example, I call this the give a mouse a cookie concept. So there are people who will reach out to you and they want something, right? And just like the book, Give a Mouse a Cookie, if you give them something, they will ask for more, right? So if you give a mouse a cookie, they'll ask for a glass of milk. They ask for a glass of milk, it'll make them tired. They'll sleep in your bed. They'll wake up, they'll want a cookie again. So with people who just reach out and ask for something, often what I'll do is I will follow up and say, can you do this thing before we meet? Can you fill out this form before we meet? Can you tell me what it is we're going to talk about before we meet? And because I create those barriers, most of those people who are just trying to get something, they will peace out right away because that's too much work for them, right? To fill out a form. That's too much work for them to explain why they want to meet or why they want to go through, this particular process. So you can create those boundaries and you can give people things to do. You don't always have to go directly to, yes, I want to meet with you. And if people really want to meet with you, they will go that extra step to do that. Somebody said, repeat the name of the book, please. If you give a mouse a cookie. It's a children's book. I got 2 daughters, so.
But it's a great book, right? It gets the message across. It's a great lesson.
Yeah.
And I guess like this will be a great segue. So Hazel asked, and I love this proper way of speaking, I reckon you will be explaining later on about how to decide which category to put them in right after you meet them.
Sure.
So how do you know which category each person goes into?
Yeah. So most of the time, what's going to happen is sort of, you're going to notice that the meeting goes a certain way. So if you're dealing with an advocate, you probably speak for most of the meeting because they ask you tons and tons of questions. Advocates will basically find out everything that they can about you, and they will try to figure out how they're going to support you and how they're going to help you. You will know that you've had a meeting with an advocate because you will have to sort of force the aspect of finding out anything about them or anything about what they need or what they're looking for. When you're dealing with a boomerang, chances are they're part of a networking group, or they're part of some sort of organized function, some kind of networking function. And it will be what I like to refer to as the two-way pitch meeting, where they will ask you about your business and what a good referral is for you. And you will then be asked to tell them, you'll be asked to, talk to them about what a good referral is for them. And it will be very transactional. You will definitely know if you're in a meeting with a boomerang, because it's literally like, it's almost like a script kind of going back and forth. Celebrities can actually fall into all the different categories. So you can have advocates who are celebrities. You can have boomerangs that are celebrities. You can have drains that are celebrities. There are plenty of celebrities out there who don't really care about your time and basically want the whole meeting to be about them. And you have to pay attention to sort of what that dynamic is. And then with drains, you'll know because it's the flip side of what an advocate scenario is. Because if you're dealing with a drain, you will end the meeting feeling drained you will feel like they have just spent, like, the way I like to frame it is, they'll Bruce Willis you from like The Sixth Sense, right? It'll be like you're just not even there. They will just go on and on and on about whatever it is they're selling or whatever it is they're talking about. They probably won't ask you one question. They will just sort of unload and, be like, this is what I want, this is what I'm looking for, etc. And that's how you know each of those categories.
You have like all this great lingo that you use, the Bruce Willis technique. I mean,
Yeah.
like, where do you come up with this stuff? Like, do you just make it up, or is this real? Like,
no, I make it
like Michael isms. Is that what it is?
Yes, these are things like, as I've noticed different things, I use them as a point of reference. And it's a big part of referability, right? So like if you want people to talk about you and your ideas, you always want to reference things that they recognize and that they understand. Right. So if I just use general terms, most people aren't going to remember it. But when I say Bruce Willising somebody, all of a sudden people remember that, and then they share it with others and they use it with others. Same thing with Book of Faces instead of Facebook, right?
Yeah, I think I'm going to use the Bruce Willising one. Okay. Yeah, I like it. All right. So I think we have time for like 2 more questions.
Okay.
And this is an excellent one. Anonymous asked, again, this like proper way of asking questions. This is for Michael at the Q&A time. I understand that it is important to create a command center. How do you go about communicating with someone who has a very different command center? Example, they only want to chat on a platform that does not send messages to email when your command center is email.
Sure. That's a really, really great question. So with people like that, you have to ask yourself, is the frustration or is the challenge worth the relationship? So in much the same way, like when I was working in theater, if you had a really, really good actor and they just like did phenomenal work, but they were a little flaky, you dealt with the fact that they were a little flaky. You were okay with that because they were always delivering such a solid performance, or they were giving you something that you really needed. But if you had an actor that was flaky and they actually weren't that strong, then you would let that actor go. And it wasn't really a thing. So the thing is, if somebody's going to be a pain in the butt about the platform, how much do you want that relationship? Like, how much are you interested in that relationship? If you're really interested, deal with whatever their issue is, right? So like if Elon Musk tells me, I'm only going to communicate via Twitter with you, I'm probably going to be like, okay, fine, we'll communicate via Twitter, right? Because it's Elon Musk, right? But if, somebody who's trying to sell me life insurance is like, I'm only going to communicate via Twitter with you, then I'm going to be like, well, have fun with that.
I mean, I would, you know what? I would say, yeah, continue to reach out via Twitter, because I'm going to mute you and it's going to go silent. So I appreciate that. Please don't clog my inbox.
Love it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Michael. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the frameworks that you shared. Like, this was really, really awesome. And for people asking, because I know I want to watch the recap. So this is being recorded, and you'll be able to access the recording and a recap of this event on our blog, meetup.com/blog. But again, it will not be available until Friday. So just be a little patient with us, but I promise you, you will all have access to it. Before we go, I want to share one last thing. Where is the slide? Here it is. Ask and you shall receive. Okay, so some of you may or may not know, Meetup launched its first podcast back at the beginning of January. Gosh, we're already in February. Keep connected with our CEO, David Siegel. And in this podcast, David speaks to different community experts and community strategists, as well as Meetup organizers and members that have impacted their communities through Meetup. So I ask you all to please take out your phones and scan the QR code that's on the screen. If you cannot scan the QR code, don't worry. You can subscribe to the podcast on Meetup. Sorry, let me take that back. You can subscribe to the podcast on meetuppodcast.com. I know I'm just like tripping over my words today, Michael. I'm so excited about the Breaking Bad technique that I'm, still tripping over my words.
Nice.
Again, if you have a few more seconds, please take out your phone and scan the QR code. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, thank you, Michael. Always a pleasure to have you.
You as well.
Maybe we can do part 3. Who knows?
Yeah. Sounds good.
Have a great day, everyone.
Awesome.
Bye.
Take care, folks.